You're listening to the Unwritable Rant podcast with your host, author, and occasional misanthrope, Juliet Miranda. Go to theunwritablerant.com and you can subscribe on iTunes or connect with the show on Facebook and Twitter.
Hi there, y'all. This is Juliet Miranda. Welcome to episode number 71 of the Unwritable Rant podcast. Happy New Year, y'all. In celebration of a fantastic 2016, I am putting down my glass of bourbon and instead I am drinking a cava. So what do you say, y'all? Whatever is in your glass, let's raise them up, toast to a tremendous year past and an absolutely incredible 2017. Cheers, y'all. Ooh, all right, I am drinking a cava, which is a Spanish sparkling wine, and I am drinking Segura Viudas. I know, sounds very fancy, doesn't it? At about $27 a bottle, it's similar to champagnes like Taittinger or Veuve Clicquot. But I'll tell you, I would drink this over either of those any day of the week. Spanish sparkling wines actually have a very interesting aging process. The second round of fermentation actually happens in the bottle in underground caves, hence the name cava. And Segura Viudas is wonderful. It's very festive. It has that effervescent, bubbly feeling, of course, but it has this tremendous, fruity sort of flavor. You know, at first you get a little bit of smoke, and then it opens up and it's full of honey and fruit and flower petals. It's so light, so easy to drink, and very, very celebratory. And the best part of this is, it doesn't give you a headache. You know that awful champagne sort of headache that you get when you drink too much of it? Doesn't happen with this stuff. Which means I'm going to be sucking down this whole bottle because I have such a fun episode for y'all today. Get a little cozy, y'all, because today I'm going to be sharing clips of some of my favorite interview segments over the past year. And I think it's only fitting to kick things off today with Eric Roberts. I cannot tell you how much fun I had talking to him. Now, here's how it goes with my interviews. When I'm doing my prep work, I am very deliberate in mapping out the questions that I want to talk to somebody about, because it's my goal to help them tell their best story possible. But every so often, after an interview ends, I get the opportunity to talk to a person a little bit more casually, a little bit more personally. So what I have for you right now is a clip with Eric that didn't make it into the interview. We're not talking about movies or his career. Instead, we're talking about my favorite place in the whole entire world. New Orleans. Just on a personal level, I know you're from the South. I was wondering if you'd spent any time in New Orleans recently.
I'm actually from New Orleans. I spent the first 6 months of my life in New Orleans, and then the next 8 years in Atlanta, and then on overseas. We lived on a 112-foot sailboat there, parked at the end of Market Street there in the water. That's where our boat was.
Oh, how spectacular. I love New Orleans. It's my favorite place in the world.
Yeah, mine too. It's also the best food in America.
Without a doubt. I could not agree more. I don't think a single person comes back from New Orleans the same. There's just something you carry with you that makes it magical and special. And obviously, Eric Roberts, who lived there and grew up in the South, he feels it too, which makes me feel good. And speaking of the South, my next clip is with Steve McGrew. I had a hell of a time picking out a clip to share with y'all from Steve because talking to him was awesome and hysterical, and he has so many great stories, particularly his one about Star Search. But instead, I wanted to share something that was a little bit more poignant and gives you a little bit more insight into what it's like to be a comedian. And what I love about this is that Steve shares an experience and a little bit of advice that he got from another comedian that we all know and loved, Sam Kinison. Is it true that early on in your career, Sam Kinison actually talked you out of quitting?
Yes. I was doing stand-up at night, and I was doing the cartoon job in the daytime, and I was getting burnt out because I was basically staying up almost all night. I was getting 2 or 3 hours sleep. And at that time, this was the 80s. You got to remember everybody was drinking and partying and everything they could think of. And it was just getting to me. And I thought, I've just got to stick with what's making me money. And Sam basically took me aside and said, this is what you're really good at. Trust me, you got to do this. You don't want to be 70 years old and wonder if you would have made it. And he's right. I mean, that's exactly, when I was like, yeah, that's really, I'd hate to be like that. I don't want to have regrets. And that's sort of where that took me.
So how do you go forward from there? What did you do? Did you take fewer gigs? Did you revise your material? How did you kind of overcome that, roadblock?
A little bit of all that. I was getting gigs, and you got to remember at this time, back in the 80s, there was not near the comics that there is now. Everybody and their mother, sister's cousin does comedy or stand up or works an open mic, you can be at an Applebee's and go, oh yeah, my waiter, he's a comic. Did he just tell you that here at the table? No. So it wasn't like that. So there was a lot more places to work and easier to get work. In the 80s, comedy clubs were popping up everywhere. I mean, you just read about one just opened in Amarillo or Lubbock. You call them and they're like, yes, we need you. Can you be here next month? You weren't even begging for work yet. And so it just sort of fell into my lap, and I just never looked back. I kind of gave myself this idea, if I can't pay my bills in a year, I'll go back to work at the newspaper. And I never had to go back.
I got to say, I love hearing people talk about the impact that other people have on their lives. And in thinking about that kind of story, well, the first person that came to my mind was country singer T.G. Sheppard. While talking to T.G., I had one of those jaw-dropping moments. Now, his career in country music is legendary. But every career needs a little bit of a boost, and every musician and every person needs just that right amount of inspiration to get them over their hurdles. Steve McGrew needed Sam Kinison's advice, and here T.G. Sheppard is going to get an incredibly special gift from another celebrity. You had so many strong supporters early on, though. I mean, Waylon Jennings, Elvis Presley gave you your tour bus.
Yeah, that was kind of special. I think when Elvis, I met Elvis when I was 15 years old, and we became instant friends and stayed very close until the day he died. I was still working for RCA, and Barry Gordy at Motown was starting a country label, and he asked me to record for him. And so I wound up, recording that first song, and Elvis heard about it and bought me my first tour bus because he felt that it would hopefully give me the confidence to really go forward and work hard in my career. And when he gave that to me as a gift, I thought to myself, well, if he believes in me enough to buy me a tour bus, I sure to heck need to really work hard to not let him down. And at the same time, it gave me the confidence to go on and have a career.
Seriously, y'all. Elvis Presley gave T.G. Sheppard a tour bus. I would love to know what happened to that bus. I'm sure it's sitting out in a field somewhere right now, rusting and gathering dust, and nobody really knows exactly where it came from. But wow, just to be riding around in a bus that has that kind of legacy, what a cool story. And since I'm on a little bit of a country kick right now, naturally, I have to share with you a clip from my interview with Charlie Daniels. Talking to the man who performs Devil Went Down to Georgia probably every day of his life was amazing. And I'm so excited because, one, he's working on an autobiography. Two, he has an album out right now full of cowboy songs, which is just fantastic. But in talking to him, I loved hearing about his early days. And just like T.G. Sheppard and Steve McGrew and everybody else, even Charlie Daniels needed a little bit of a boost to get his career going from Bob Dylan. In 1969, you were invited to play with Bob Dylan in the studio. Could you tell me a little bit about that first session with him?
Yes, I was supposed to be the only session. Actually, what happened was when they did Nashville Skyline, they had booked 15 recording sessions to do the entire album. And a very fine session guitar player they wanted to do all 15. And he was unavailable for the very first one. He could make all the rest of the other 14, but he couldn't make the first one. So Bob Johnson asked me to fill in, and I did. And I was packing my stuff up after the first session. I was packing my stuff up to leave, and Bob Dylan asked Bob Johnson, where's he going? And Bob Johnson said, he's leaving. I got another guitar player coming in. And Bob Dylan had said 9 words that would change my life. He said, I don't want another guitar player. I want him. It's one of the most incredible things that ever happened to me. Of course, it was a huge encouragement to continue with my career. Maybe I was doing the right thing. And it was just one of those moments that you have that really kind of says you're doing the right thing. Just keep on at it and get better. Just do the best you can at it. So that was that first Dylan session was a very big deal to me.
Now I have something of an interesting connection to the person in this next segment, and that would be the Reverend Bob Levy. Bob is a stand-up comedian who has done work with Howard Stern, Artie Lang. He is hysterically funny, and this interview had me on the floor the entire time because Bob is just so damn funny. But here's what's really cool about it. We both had so much fun doing this interview that Bob invited me to start another podcast with him. I cannot tell you how cool it was to work with him. But in getting to know Bob, it has given me a tremendous amount of respect for his work ethic and for his humor. And this clip that I'm sharing with you now is from our very first conversation. And it demonstrates exactly what I adore about him. And that is his quick wit. Well, now, what about today? How has your approach to your act changed? I mean, considering, like you said, audiences are different. You know, people are way more politically correct. Clubs are different. So what's changed in your material?
Nothing has changed. I don't give a fuck. When I do a show, I go out there to kill for those people. I do the show for those people in the audience. I'd be the best killer in the world because I will stab you in the face with a smile on my face. So that's how I do my comedy. So I can basically say anything and get away with it. But I read the room and I know what not to do and what to do. And, you know, so it's just different now. And now you have like the club owners hosting, you know, to save money. And it's a totally, after this summer, you're going to see clubs close. You'll see.
What I find fascinating is just how quick-witted you are. You know, just the fact that you've got so much going on, you're working this room. How do you just keep it all organized in your head when you're out there?
Well, the whole thing is, one thing, you know, even though I didn't graduate high school, I'm able to think like 4 or 5 things in my head as I'm talking. So as I'm doing a joke, I can see somebody walking. I can think about the joke that got the laugh before it. I can think about maybe where I want to go or what I'm going to do after this one. So it basically, that makes you quick. You know, that's why nobody gets up to go to the bathroom when I hit the stage.
Because they are in for trouble.
Well, they're done. You know what I mean? I've actually grabbed people, picked them up, and put them back in their seat and go, look, I got to piss too, but you ain't getting up when I'm up, you know?
For starters, it's just rude to do that in the middle of a set. So, yeah, call them out.
Yeah, you got a bad bladder. That's not my problem. Stay in a fucking hospital, you loser.
Exactly. You shouldn't be going out and drinking at a club.
Well, yeah, if you can't handle your drink through fucking 2 bad acts and a headliner.
Now, in talking to all of these incredibly talented people, I have to say that out of all of these conversations, my very favorite one was with Chuck Negron from Three Dog Night. When I am not listening to country music, I'm listening to Three Dog Night. And Chuck is at the forefront of all of my favorite songs by them. Old Fashioned Love Song, One, and of course, Joy to the World. And I have to admit that in talking to Chuck, I was incredibly nervous. Because every so often I get a little starstruck. I do, I admit it. And having the passion that I've had for Three Dog Night, it was mind-blowing to get insight into the band. Now, unfortunately, the band's story is not the happiest one. And in this next clip, Chuck is going to give a little bit of insight into how his role evolved in Three Dog Night, and eventually what led to the demise of the band. I read in an interview, you once said that your initial role in Three Dog Night was actually kind of as a third wheel. But it seems to me that you had a much larger position in the band than that.
Yeah, well, when it started off, I was the third guy that they asked. Kind of had a little audition, and they asked me, and I said, of course. And initially I was just happy to be in the band, and kind of Danny ran things, and Corey was jousting for position. That's the way things happen in bands. And it wasn't until the very first single was picked, which was One, when Danny heard that One was picked, he really kind of I didn't know, but he kind of turned on me. I don't know if that's the correct word, but what he did was he called Corey, and of course, Corey would have rather have one of his songs. So, Danny kind of stirred up some stuff, and Corey, we shouldn't have that. It should be a group song. That was their idea. It should be a group song, which I understand, by the way, but they didn't tell me. They went to the management and then went to the record company and had the song pulled in lieu of another song called Nobody, which I brought to the band. It was my song. When I found out in a very embarrassing way. I found out in a meeting with the record company when I thanked the president, what are you talking about? And I went, well, one. He said, one's not the single. So it was awkward. And what hurt was that they didn't even tell me. I mean, they just changed it like I was nothing. So when a couple of other singles were released and they didn't make it, I did the same thing they did. I went to the record company and I said, you don't understand, this is a hit record. You were right. Every night I sing this song, it gets the greatest ovation, and it's not even an up-tempo song. It's a mid-tempo. They released it in Northwest, and within 2 to 3 weeks, it was number one. And they went with it, and it came out first number one. So I had to assert myself and move in. Else, the band was going to hurt itself. I really felt that these guys' egos were hurting the band as opposed to, helping the band. And that's when my role became completely different. And it wasn't so much that the band looked to me. They did after a while, but initially I was like a traitor. That I went to the record company and did all this stuff. And I was really separated from the band. But who looked to me was the record company. And the next record, they called me and they said, what do you have in the can for the new album, which was Suitable for Me? Because we want to go with your voice. And I said, easy to be, hard to hit. And that went to number one on Record World too. So after that, we were doing TV all the time. So as far as Three Dog Night goes, I was the face of the band, because I was doing all the TV show. Not that I was the guy in the band. We really had a talented band where, Corey could have been the guy because he's saying he was as good as I was. Danny wasn't quite as good as I was. And I found out later it's usually the weaker link that kind of stirs up the stuff. So, Corey and I had several hits before Danny even had a first single, which was Liar. So I was forced to move forward, which is not a role I wanted. It was not a role I wanted. And I had paid dearly for doing it because I was chastised. But I found out how strong I was, that it didn't stop me. And my just being the person I was, everyone came around. They realized it wasn't ego. At first I thought it was ego. I mean, ego. I did something for the band. And if it was ego, I mean, it was definitely a Muhammad Ali thing. This is number one, and it went to number one. Everything came together, and the band came together. Unfortunately, Danny's role, because it's a business of doing things, and you have to. Your credibility doesn't hold true by just saying you're running the band if you're not, coming with the goods. So he finally fell by the wayside, not by us. We loved it. He was another guy in the band. He was as important as anybody else because, we had to do harmony. We had to, 7-guy band. It takes every guy to do it, but by the record company. And he knew that, and it really hurt him. And he got himself into trouble. He was one of our first casualties with drugs and alcohol.
Seriously, y'all, it is heartbreaking the way Three Dog Night ended. But Chuck is the most resilient man in rock and roll, and he has overcome, and he is out there touring, recording new albums, and still singing some of my favorite songs ever. It's just incredible the impact that things can have on your life, whether it's a song or a movie. And one of my favorite movies about rock and roll would have to be This Is Spinal Tap. And not so very long ago, I got to talk to Ed Begley Jr., who was in This Is Spinal Tap, and who, of course, has been in such great Christopher Guest movies like Best in Show, and most recently, Mascots. He is changing the way that we all look at environmentalism. And of course, he is a phenomenal actor. So this clip right now, he's going to be talking about my favorite movie, hands down, which is Best in Show, and talking a little bit about what it's like to be on set working and improvising with other great actors. Now, in the film, you play a competition judge. I know his movies are so heavily improv. How much input did you get in your character's backstory?
There's all the backstory that you need, courtesy of Chris Guest and Jim Pittick. It used to be Chris Guest and Eugene Levy. They would write the only difficult part of the process. The heavy lifting is them doing that work, writing the 25-page treatment. Then we go on set in front of a camera and have a party. You just kind of hang out and joke around, and you're not worried about, am I going to hit the right notes as a musician? You know, what are the notes in this beautiful arrangement? What you basically have is a treatment, which is like a chord chart for a musician. You know, you just know that you're in the key of G minor, and then you play accordingly. That's what makes it so much fun. You don't worry about your lines because there are no real lines as such. But Chris, of course, will often give you a line or suggest a line, and there's sometimes one's suggested or written out in the script, but it's mostly improv. And that's great fun because you're working with, you know, Jane Lynch, in my case, in this recent movie, Mascots, and working with Mike Hitchcock and working with all these great John Lake, very talented people. So you just show up and you try to hold your own with the likes of Jane Lynch. She's such a talent.
Well, yeah, you guys had great chemistry. I mean, how did you not just, you know, crack up during your shoots? You have so much talent and so much fun. I would be on the floor laughing all day long.
That's the challenge from the beginning, from the first one, Best in Show. You know, when I worked the first day was suddenly Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara there at the hotel desk, and all that is in the script is just one line. So Jerry and Cookie Fleck try to check into the hotel. The credit card doesn't work. So my job is to just stand there like Easter Island, like the Sphinx, and to not go sky high and listen to what they're saying and try to respond and try to put their credit card through and it doesn't work, and try to just be a real desk clerk at a real hotel. But then Chris opened the floodgates and said, we're going to go into this little storage room and do some stuff in here in the storage room about the pet supplies and what have you, and how you're going to make room for them here because you couldn't find a room for them. And so, you know, when Chris says it's open season, you go for it.
Now, I said it in the interview, and I will say it again. I do not know how it is possible to not be on set with so much talent and not just spend your day laughing. And I think we could all use a little bit of laughter in our lives. And if not laughter, then perhaps poetry. Which brings me to my next clip, which is with singer-songwriter Don McLean. His iconic song, American Pie, has been sung by people for generations. It contains some of the most beautiful lyrics I have ever read. And Don McLean is just as insightful and creative to talk to as he is to listen to. Now, I talked to Don McLean for more than an hour, so not all of our conversation made it into that episode. And that's why I'm so excited right now to share with you an extended clip where Don and I talk a little bit about how we feel about new music today. Well, I think one of the things that's really changed with the internet and so much information being available is that people aren't interpreting things the way that they used to. There isn't as much thought put into them. And that's why I think songs like American Pie are still so relevant, because there's no way to cleanly understand it. You know, you really need to think about it, kind of experience it.
Well, I mean, poetry and the English language are taking a hell of a beating.
Yes.
Because everything has gotten very simple. Poetry is what you're talking about. Any kind of poetry requires interpretation and it requires thought. Again, it's that people don't have the time, they don't have the concentration to do this. They want a simple, who let the dogs out type of mantra that's spoken over and over. Every time I go into a store, there's some god-awful repetitive thing going on in the background, and I tell myself, if I had to work in this store, I'd hang myself, because it's just over and over, and you just want to scream. They tune it out, I suppose, but that's a chance when I get to hear, what people are listening to. And I say to them, if I hear that little lick one more time, I'm going to go nuts. It's the idea, it seems, with music now is that if you do some dumb thing enough times, the people are somehow going to remember it because it's been drummed into their heads. That's not a real hook. Any great hit record has a hook that the minute you hear it once, you don't ever forget it. This is something where it's a dumb thing that's repeated so many times, and I still can't remember it, but I guess people do. But that's the theory, take something dumb and do it over and over.
Well, y'all, I got to say, 2016 has been one hell of a year. Now, if you want to check out the full version of any of these interviews, just go to theunwritablерant.com. All of my episodes are there. Or you can head on over to iTunes and subscribe to the show there so you never miss a single episode. Now, before I close out this show, I want to share one more clip from T.G. Shepherd. In this episode, I've talked quite a bit about the impact that other people can have on the direction of someone's life, or just as an inspiration to them. And that's why I'm sharing this clip with TG with y'all right now. It was tremendously exciting to be able to talk with him at all, but our conversation closed out with some tremendous advice that he gave me. And it's words like this that make doing the podcast and sharing other people's stories with y'all so worthwhile. Thank you, Mr. Shepherd, for speaking with me today. It's been a huge treat for me.
First of all, it's TG, Mr. Shepherd. My dad's not here.
All right, TG.
Everybody calls me TG, or they call me T. Can I tell you something, Juliet?
Yes.
A lot of people, when they do interviews, it sounds like an interview. And then you'll do an interview with someone and it just becomes a conversation. And you have mastered the art of conversation. Whether you know it or not, you really and truly are great at what you do, because you make it sound so easy. And so you really have mastered the art of interviewing, which just becomes a conversation. And I'm really blown away with doing this with you today. I really am.
Wow, that really means a lot to me. I appreciate that so much. I really do.
Well, you're welcome. You really are great. I mean, you need to syndicate your show nationwide.
Well, fingers crossed.
You got a great voice.
Someday. Here's hoping.
Go for it.
So I just want to take a moment to just say thank you to everybody, to the people that have been so gracious with their time and talking with me, and to all of y'all for listening. Here's to a great 2017, y'all. Cheers.
Girl, you was pretty as a Sunday morning, standing on the corner at Carondelet. What you say we make our way up to Bourbon, a couple hurricanes and a hand grenade, and get blown away and let the chips fall where they may. If it's all the same, what you say, bon ton relay. Hey, pretty mama, I can smell the gumbo, sweetest taste of honeysuckle on my lips. Good God Almighty, I can hear the trombone. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm like this. Come a little closer, honey, let me hold you. Nothing tastes better than a bourbon kiss. You can be the flower on my magnolia. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm like this.